Welcome, adventurers. Today we're going to be turning all this, well, into this. I do more tabletop role-playing. I've never really done wargaming for a long, long time. And so a lot of the structures I make have to do with role-playing games. So playable interior and exterior, interesting design, all that matters to me a great deal. But fortunately, because there's a lot of overlap between tabletop role-playing games and wargaming, a lot of the same things need to be taken into account, like terrain elevation changes and line of sight blocking. And versatility in these structures also matters. But today I've made something that's a structure that you could recreate, but can easily be used, at least in my worlds and my games, as a place where your adventurers go to get that next mission or wind down after their last one. It's the Spirited Adventurer. I know it's a cheesy name, but I'm a cheesy guy, so get over it. I wanted to keep a interesting geometric profile, and so that's what I was experimenting with here in the beginning, is figuring out how I wanted it to look. And it's easy to make a box, and you can take a cylinder from just about anything you have and make that. But here I created an angle I liked, and then I needed to create structures to support that. And I wanted to be more interesting than just these cardboard cutout pieces that I created. So I designed some and 3D printed them because I wanted something a little more interesting. I'm also putting this on a 12 by 12 inch piece of XPS foam. I beveled the edges a little bit, but kept the 12 by 12 structure because ultimately I'm going to be building some modular panel boards for gaming with roadways and things like that, and I want all of these little pieces that I'm building, these terrain pieces, to be able to fit into it pretty seamlessly, as though they're part of that terrain and structure. Now, with a basic idea of how I want the structures to look, I'm going to lay it out. I don't usually do this too much, at least not on camera, but I will play around with the pieces off camera and figure out how I want to lay them out. Here, I actually drew it out where we have the first floor that's facing one direction, then a support structure that's going to support the second floor. I know it's not terribly complicated, but that's what it is. Now, since I have my angle figured out, I'm going to use this as a template so I can trim edges. And that way when I begin putting the structure together, these edges will come together and create kind of a unique beveled angular look to the structure. And it's really that simple. Once I figured everything out, I kind of just mass produced it to create this. And the upper part of the screen is for the lower section, the upper half, and the bottom part of the screen is what is the bottom half. And I'm measuring to make sure I cut out cardboard to fit in those structures properly to fill it out for the floor and the ceiling. For the second floor, I took the same exact structures and just inverted them. So that the top was the bottom and the bottom was the top. I know, I'm being very complicated on this build. I made it a weird angled box, a rhomboid box. And there's my measurements, 5 3/8 by 10.5 inches, 4.5 by 9.5 inches for the other section. To make sure I don't confuse them, I separate them. I wanted to make windows because windows just are neat, I guess. What's a structure without windows? Just a box. So with granny grating, I'm using the inserts, or using as inserts for the windows. And I cut in about a 1/2 inch from the top and the bottom and about 1.5 inches from the sides to create the mirrored rhomboid shape. And then using 1/2 centimeter strips of the same medium density chipboard, I made window frames. And on the end pieces, I used 1/2 inch or 1/2 centimeter, 5 millimeter, and on the long sections, I used 1 centimeter. Now you notice in this image, there's a section that doesn't have a window because that's where the door is going to go ultimately. Here I'm trying to figure out my layout for the inner support structures. I want to make sure that I've positioned them properly so that way they don't interfere with the windows. And that's what they look 3D printed. I wanted them to be kind of interesting and it would take me forever to craft something like those, but it took like an hour and a half to 3D print them. So I definitely went that route. Super glue them in place after figuring out where I want them. Basically a 1/2 inch in from each corner and mid of the board. Start super gluing them to the cardstock. Just like this. And you have a structure. And like I said, this one is actually the upper floor. The bottom floor is the mirror image of this, so its narrow side is towards the ground, longer side is towards the ceiling. Just like that. Now, to attach the doors, I used my template here for the inner support structures, and literally just traced it on a piece of cardstock, and then cut those out. One mirrors the inner section of the building, and one mirrors the outer section of the building. Very simple, actually. I put a lot of thought into it when I was doing it, and then realized that I was making it more complicated than I needed to, trying to figure out complicated geometric shapes. And I was like, well, I already have it. I'll just use what I've already made. And just like that, they'll slap into place. Glue a couple more pieces in, and it's a box that glues to these. Now, I wasted a lot of time cutting up EVA foam, but since you're watching me do that now, you should like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget the benefits of being a patron member. And I now have one. I mean, just one, but that's surprising to me. And of course, I have a variety of tiers, and all of you who sign up will definitely get access to all of my 3D design things, direct access to me, a say in how we do things, all of it, regardless of your tier. Now, this is 1 centimeter pieces of cardstock from food packaging. And I've just bespoke cut them because it's a little easier to make sure everything looks more sound on these small scale things when you bespoke cut each piece. And that's all I'm doing here, and it helps really tie in those corners and make sure any, say, not pretty cuts look great. And I do that all the way around on both pieces. Well, almost all the way around, which is my biggest flaw in this one. I haven't had a big mistake in a while, and somehow I managed to not, during the entire build, realize that I didn't put trim on one end of one building, and I don't know how. I even film it. It's somewhat entertaining that I could make something, hold it to my face, and not see that I did not put card trim on one end of one of these buildings. It's absurd. I don't know that I'm going to fix it, especially now that it's done. I mean, it's like 4 pieces of cardstock. Here's what they look like fully assembled. Well, almost fully assembled, minus a few pieces of trim, apparently. That's the basics of the structure. That's the ground floor one. Interior, removable lid. You could use it for storage when you're not gaming. Obviously, you can set up the interiors however you want. And right here is somehow I missed putting trim on the center and the bottom and the top edge of this entire end. I make it through the entire build, painting the entire thing without noticing that. I don't know how. Clearly, I lost my mind when I was doing this one, but I did it. I completely screwed that up. Now I'm doing a test layout. I want to see where everything looks. Kind of doing a cross layout for the upper section, just so I have a basic footprint so I know where I need to put my support structure. Now I'm going to do some painting. The upper part I paint a light brown, as you see here, through the airbrush, because it's quicker and gives it an even coat. Just like that. Not terribly exciting. The lower part of the building I did a light gray. Then I'll put on some racing stripes because in a lot of my sci-fi ideas on these backwoods worlds and stuff like that, they're repurposed cargo containers or hab pods that have been used for a not intended or not wholly intended purpose. So they've been marked by the manufacturers with colors to identify what they are and where they are. Now here my masking tape pulled off my paint from my primer. That's fine. That's free weathering. So I'm going to expand that weathering because I actually liked how it looked. And I've used this same technique in other areas before, but it's just basic flat black paint, torn off sponge on a shish kebab skewer in this case. Lightly dab it in the paint and carefully dab it along edges and any places where you want chipping to be. It's good to rotate the sponge periodically as you're doing this so you don't have repeated patterns. Now for the base, that piece of foam, I've marked out holes where the stairs for the upper level go, and I put on gesso. Now while it's drying, I'm going to paint a few of the detail pieces that I 3D printed, like these doors, the satellite dish, maybe some air conditioning units. Now this gray right here is fantastic. It looks just like concrete, in my opinion. I mean, its color is great, and I wanted this to look like a big concrete slab. Those black dots you see are actually holes in the board where the supports of these go. A little dry brushing of silver to show some wear and tear on the metal. And now for the wash. Make some really old garlic olives. Spray the surface with water. And of course, slather on the black wash. Now, of course, this isn't really garlic olives. It's like black paint, water, and a little dish soap to break up the surface tension. Now I'd like to thank my only patron, LAJ, a legendary character. Here's the final result, the Spirited Adventurer. Obviously, I designed and 3D printed the sign. It would have been a bit tedious trying to cut all those little pieces out because they're actually quite small. I think they're only like 1 mil wide. Here you can see that both sections can be used as individual structures. Front and back shots. You've got what could be a landing pad or just an upper platform if you're gaming with this or if you were doing your wargaming with it. Here's what it looks like with them both stacked on top of each other as it's intended. Another shot from the back alley section. A side view here with some of the air conditioning units visible. And of course the front with the sign. And now we're going to lay it out with some characters, some adventurers sneaking out the back while some soldiers are coming in the front. Another angle of the same thing. How you can lay it out with different materials. Maybe your adventurers rent this place out for their own little place. Maybe it's just a bar on some world that they're visiting. Regardless, you're going to have a time at the Spirited Adventurer. Thank you for watching. Now go have an adventure in crafting.